Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off. Good morning, everyone. This is the first formal meeting of the STEM Communications Advocacy Committee. As such, today's agenda is pretty straightforward. After introductions, we're going to talk about the goals and charge of this subcommittee, look at some of the other efforts that are going on around STEM, and even probably talk a little bit about CTE and how it aligns with what we're working on as well. We need to come up with a work plan and a timeline for our work going forward. We have some challenges and perceptions we need to continue to work on at the state level as well as within the legislature. And then we'll probably do a little bit of an inventory on some of the key stakeholders we need to keep in line. And then we'll do some public comment at the end. It's a nice small group. Folks on the phone, it sometimes is hard to contribute, so do not be shy. If you have something to say, bang a gong or do something so that we know that you want to talk, and we'll make sure that we include you. With that, I think we should go ahead and start with some introductions. I'll start and then we'll go around the room counterclockwise here. My name's Eric Meslow. I'm the president and CEO of a fiber optic manufacturing company down in Tualatin called Timbercon. Obviously a member of the STEM Investment Council as well as the chair of ETIC.
Mark Lewis, Director of STEM for the Oregon Education Investment Board and the Chief Education Officer.
Aubrey Clark with Intel Public Affairs.
There you go.
Don Downs with Hillsborough School District Special Projects in STEM and CTE Office of School Performance.
Excellent.
I'm Kyle Riccinol with the Oregon Business Council and the CTE STEM Employer Coalition.
I'm Kristen Gibble, the Communications Director for the Oregon Education Investment Board, Chief Education Officer. And I have to leave about 11, so I apologize in advance for
Roger
sneaking
that.
out.
No problem. Jim.
Joe Oshiro, Education Specialist in STEM for Oregon Department of Ed.
All right. And then on the phone, Diedrich, introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Diedrich Steinmetz. I'm Dean of Science and Engineering at the Sylvania campus of Portland Community College.
Great. And Dana?
Hi, this is Dana Richardson with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. I won't be able to stay for the entire meeting, but I appreciate being able to join you for a little bit.
Not a problem. Thank you for being here. Any other people on the phone that may have joined or are being stealthy? All right, not hearing any. Right now, the only two voting members of the council that are here in attendance are Aubrey Clark and myself. Other voting members that are on this subcommittee are Jim Pyro of PGE and Dwayne Johnson as well. So,
And Jim isn't an official member, he just wants to attend.
He's the chair,
Yeah.
right? So it's just the three of us then?
Correct.
Okay. And then just a point of clarification, this is obviously a public meeting.
Yes.
We still are under the same rules. We need to vote on things. We don't have a quorum today, or I guess we do have a quorum. 2 out of 3 is a quorum. Is there anything like that we have to worry about for requirements?
Seth, would you like to?
If you have a quorum,
We're good, huh? We can change the logo and the colors and the name of the organization.
We've got logos? Excellent.
Excellent. All right. We're free to do anything we want, Aubrey, is what I
The
think I
quorum
heard.
is 2 people, really?
Between
2 people.
Great.
Yes, exactly. Very scary.
And
Let's get it
Seth,
done.
could you please clarify, the public meeting laws as they in regard to subcommittees?
sure. If you are if you're a group that's put together and you are giving any sort of suggestions to a higher group, like a subcommittee to a STEM investment council, then it is a public meeting. Plus the Oregon Education Investment Board and affiliated groups always are working to be a more transparent any sort of meetings we want to have the public.
Okay.
Right.
And do we need to vote to make a formal suggestion to the main council?
Yeah.
Do we have to have consensus formally on the record?
I think that, yeah, on the record, I think you should come up with a recommendation.
Okay.
And kind of adopt that recommendation before it goes to STEM. Yes, and council.
All right.
The other thing, Seth, that you had brought up with a different subcommittee was that in terms of, we're going to be inviting, I know that there's the desire amongst the council and this subcommittee to have advisors who are a part of this process. If they become official members of the subcommittee, then
So
this...
what triggers the public meeting law is if not even a quorum, it's kind of a gray area. So if you have 2 or 3 members of a committee talking together, that could trigger your public meeting law. So, and that's group emails,
We
anything
just
like
talk to
that.
ourselves.
So the more people you have, especially if you're having, if you have advisors, I would suggest if you don't want to trigger that, maybe have
Make a larger
ex
pool.
officio or advisors, but not actual permanent members.
Permanent members of the subcommittee.
That's very tactical. I appreciate the advice. That's wise. So with that, and looking back on how we're communicating in regards to the emails and other things, I still would like some level of clarity in regards to.
So if a group email goes out
Yeah.
and everybody kind of comments on it, that could be public meeting law. What we have defaulted to is the staffer sends out an email, either individually, you respond individually, back to the staffer, and then he takes that information and puts it together. That's what we do with the subcommittees for Oregon Education Investment Board.
Okay.
Oregon Education Investment.
All right.
Thank
It's a little
you.
bit more time, but it's,
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and I guess the comment would be that I'm involved in talking to Aubrey about other things other than necessarily this work. So there's a lot of emails sometimes that are bouncing around.
Yeah.
if you guys are dealing with other things, it's
Yeah.
not.
Okay, and then because it's public record, are we subject to Freedom of Information Act?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, and how would that work if it's my personal email accounts at my office?
We're watching you.
Well, you would find my lawyers would probably be really, really hesitant to allow you to have access to anything on my servers.
So, I know personally I don't use, if you're not discussing personal email, if you're using your personal email
Mhm.
account for business like this, it could be pulled down for a public records request.
Okay.
So I would,
The records pertaining to not all
well,
records and
so
emails.
I don't use my personal cell phone, I have a work cell phone, and I don't let those cross, because if I have a couple texts or anything from work, and they want to take from
Sweep.
me, because I'm a state employee.
Right.
So they take all of that, so I.
Yeah.
So-
So they sweep his email or do just his responses to emails to state employees?
My
That's a
next
good
question.
I'll-
So we don't need to get on this completely, but I think this might be something that we want to talk about with the general counsel, because there may be some strategies we want to do, like create a separate email accounts and things like that, because, I mean, I just really don't want my work servers, I mean, my lawyers will go ape, so, because of the defense work I do. So,
Yeah.
they won't allow it, period.
Right.
So, all right, enough about that. Thank you for the clarification. We'll see what we can figure out. All right, with that, Mark, do you want to grab the agenda?
Sure, I'll just say a couple of words, you know, and to lay the framework for what we might consider the charge of this subcommittee. Right now, I have a tentative charge of the committee, and I'll just read it, and then we can talk a little bit more about it. But it is to create a messaging platform for key stakeholder groups, such as business, legislators, parents, students, educators, that articulates the urgency to inspire and prepare more Oregonians to meet the economic and workforce demands in STEM, and to develop a plan to engage decision makers to ensure that our efforts are aligned with the interests of communities and key constituencies. So the idea here is that we've got, you know, the communications piece is how do we build broader support and understanding of what our mission is and what we're trying to do to enable us to be more effective in the longer term, as well as more tactical and strategic in regard to legislative advocacy pieces that are important to the council as a whole. So what I know from a number of different states who are approaching STEM, and we'll get more into this in terms of challenges and perceptions, is that we have a huge uphill battle to wage when it comes to people understanding what we are trying to do. in regard to STEM, and that plays out in a number of ways. It plays out in terms of influencing principals and educators around STEM. It plays out in regard to the general public who thinks that STEM is about broccoli or stem cells. It plays out in terms of legislators who might believe that STEM is for academically successful white males, and so why are we investing, X million of dollars to people who are already going to be successful anyway? It plays out in a number of different ways, and I can't understate how challenging this work has been to change perceptions of STEM to enable us to then effectively transform the education system, to effectively engage with employers to help complement what is going on within our education system, both at a post-secondary level as well as a K-12 and an early learning level. And then there's issues for students themselves. If we're actually thinking about doubling the number of STEM degrees and credentials in STEM to fuel the demand from our industry and workforce and economic prosperity, then the students themselves have to see that STEM is an exciting and a viable career opportunity for them. Right now, they see it largely as boring because that's what their experience is. Their experience is dealing with math that has no relevance to their lives and to the real world. Math is a huge barrier for many people. Science is perceived as, for those people going on to four-year universities. It's the eggheads. Engineering within the K-12 system is largely unknown, or it's project lead the way now. Technology, it has been about keyboarding in the vast majority of classrooms and districts. That's changing on an individual level in Don's classes, in John Niebergall's classes, and other people who are using 3D printing. But we should not be sticking our heads in the sand thinking that just because we have a group of advocates here who have been talking about this for a very, very long time, that there is a shift in public perception, because there isn't. Time and time again, we see, and Washington STEM recently did a public outreach to try to get public perceptions. Those public perceptions have not substantially changed. It has been changing amongst educators who get STEM messaging all the time, and in fact, the most recent education leadership, which goes to a lot of superintendents and principals, had a whole issue around STEM. So that's great, but there's a lot of misconceptions out there that we're battling, so I can't understate the importance of this subcommittee.
I concur.
I'm not sure that's where things were.
No, I
wanted
think,
to go on that.
No, I think that's very, very straightforward. I concur in the sense that we've been doing this, many of us have been doing this around the table for a while, and we see each other at the same meetings, and we all have a very big kumbaya. We understand the problem. We're tired about talking about the problem. We want to get down in the dirt and actually start solving the problem. And we've been successful to the point where we've now increased our circle dramatically of influence, and a bunch of those people that are now in the circle still don't get it. So it's very frustrating to think that people still don't get it, even though a very tight group of us, and not even tight, hundreds of us, if not thousands of us in the state get it. But we're finding that circle encompasses some very powerful airlocks as well in regards for us being able to do our work. So we need to do not only larger reaching marketing to the parents and to the schools and the educators, but I think to a great degree we need to continue to put a lot of pressure on our leadership to understand this at a high level, because ultimately this is a representative democracy and they have the vote for all those people that don't get it, and if they get it, we can still get some traction. So we need to figure out how to make sure that the governor's office is 5 by 5 with this, that the education department and the higher education is all good with this. So it becomes a priority and we can get some traction. So I concur completely.
Why should anyone care about this?
Yeah, by the way, that's Dwayne Johnson, our third council member weighing in. He's now with us, for those of you on the phone. Why should we care about
No,
this?
not why should we care. Why should anyone care about this?
Well, I think it goes back to the perspectives that we're already on here. I mean, this goes back to the economic prosperity, for equity, equality across the state. Ultimately, the state runs on revenue. Revenue is generated by industry. Industry needs to have the workforce that is needed to be able to do so. It's a virtuous circle, obviously, and it's some of the same messaging and marketing that we're going to talk about today. And we need to figure out, what's your perspective on that, Dwayne? Why should we care? Or why should people care?
It wasn't a rhetorical question, really, but it's the question that's really behind some of the actions I think we see in people. In other words, this isn't about me. This isn't for me. I get nothing out of this. And so why should I, and I don't understand it.
Yeah.
So why?
Exactly.
Why is this even relevant? When you talk about some of the kids in school, you see the ones that get it, they get really excited. Okay, they see their future, they see the possibility, they see fun, they see them creating their own futures, they see them putting their hands on things that can actually make a difference. But then you step back away from that, and I don't know how many of you sat down with parents, particularly parents of underrepresented communities, that have no concept of what this is. No concept, and don't see it anywhere in their communities.
Exactly.
Okay, so, and the ones that might get a sliver of that, they say, well, you know what? It never comes to my community, so why do I care about that? I need to care about the things that are important, which is I need to find some way to get some dollars in my pocket. Or, if you're a teacher like Dawn that's in school and trying to fight for this stuff, they see this as a zero-sum game of their dollars going to some other pot. And they see this sacred cow that they have that looks like it's going to get gored, and they're not interested in that.
Yeah.
So why is it important? Okay, so we get why it's important on a number of different levels. Is there a way for us to actually get them to see this at least a little bit from their perspective, and see the value and the proposition behind that? So is there it's almost like the cheat sheet of, if your issues or your beliefs are X, well, here's how STEM and this work we talk about connects to you.
Sure.
So they get that aha moment that comes up and say, oh, okay, I see that.
And I think you nailed the crux
Yeah.
of the challenge in front of us, is that to the driving questions that we have, it's not why should anyone care, though. It's why should a student care? Why should a parent care? Why should a legislator care? Why should business care? Why should a principal care? Why should an administrator care? Why should Nancy Golden care? What we've got here, and a communications director that I've worked with in the past said to me, there is no such thing as general public when it comes to communication. You cannot put out blanket statements. What you have to do is understand your audience. So we need to understand our audience and create a messaging platform that speaks to each of those audiences in different ways. And you'll see in our packages here, and I've previously sent to the council, sort of 9 different themes that resonate with different constituencies. And so if you're talking to business and industry, it can be about the jobs pipeline. What do they care about? They care about revenue. They care about talent. They care about being economically competitive. They care about being nimble in this job market. If you care about, it's about a student, well, what does a student care about? Is it interesting to me? Do I, find it fascinating? Can I see myself working in this? Does it float my boat and to spark an interest? If it's about parents, it's about, wage earning jobs for my kids to be prosperous. When you talk about, to educators, it's about graduation and individual prosperity. They don't give a rip about, not all of them, but I'm sorry about that. The thing that doesn't resonate with them is the jobs pipeline, because they don't see themselves as a pipeline piece. They're about, the whole child, and about, Juan's success, not about the success of TimberCon. So
Absolutely. So to use that overall lens, I think one of the big questions is, we have a very large boat to float, and we're not going to be able to raise it up across the board. So one of the things that I would encourage everybody to do is, we think about what we're going to do around advocacy, what we're going to do around communications, which, by the way, are 2 different things. Where are we going to prioritize our efforts? And it may be, it's not that the things on the bottom of the list never are gotten to, but you better start at something that's going to make the impact that allows you the time, the effort, and the money to get to the bottom of the list, right? And some of those things may be larger. For example, marketing to individual students is a large task, right? Marketing to 60 legislators is a much more definable task.
But if you
both are
market
important.
to students, you
You
can
can.
utilize your STEM hubs as the delivery, right? I mean.
Right, no, don't get me wrong, I'm not prioritizing. I'm just saying that we're going to have this conversation.
What,
Yeah.
so
That's what we're
to
gonna have.
that one, the thing that I've seen in other states again is the conversation is what do legislators care about? Legislators care about constituencies.
Mhm.
So if you can reach their constituency, then they care.
Right. So are we going to go grassroots? Are we going to go strategic and targeted? I mean, there's a variety of different ways to do this. Long story short, the point I wanted to start before we get into some of the other details is we have two charges within this organization that are different in some degree, and that is communications or marketing, and ultimately advocacy, PR, and actual legislative. When I hear advocacy, there is advocacy obviously in the marketing, and don't get me wrong, that is being a preacher to the masses. But advocacy in regards to political action, working with legislators, working with the governor's office, working with people who have votes and who have the money. Are we in agreement that there's kind of a division between the two in regards to the efforts and some of the strategies that will be going on? Obviously, they're complementary and they have to work together, but one of them is a significantly different talent group than the other.
I think it makes sense, and Mark and I were talking earlier, and I think we'll probably get to it if we do follow the agenda at some fast. But other efforts, it's like, the OBC and the newly reinvented CTE STEM Council. Are these other
Employers
groups,
Coalition.
Employers Coalition, whatever they, because we have 30 of them now.
Councils?
How do we utilize other groups that are actually doing the same work, so we're not duplicating efforts like we always like to do too. We talk about the problem that we just continue to duplicate and put people in the same groups to accomplish the same issues. Sorry. I will stop there, but the point is it's on the agenda as other
Yes.
efforts, and I think that, Eric, we should probably lean on other efforts when it comes to specific
Certain
things that
Sure.
might ease the
Understand.
lift
rough
for
points
us.
of whatever comes out of this.
Well, we certainly don't have the personnel, the budget,
Yeah.
or anything else to do this on our own. There's no doubt about that. So the last thing in regards.
Can I just say one more
Yeah.
thing too? And I think the other thing that Mark and I were talking about, to me, I think part of the communications too is just that, is keeping all these other groups
Informed?
informed.
Sure.
Because we're talking about communicating out to
Yeah.
different people, but, you guys sit in 3 different meetings a day with my manager or me or Carly, and,
Yeah.
I think communication is part of that too, and I
Yeah.
don't want that to get missed either.
It's how do we bring coherence to
Yes.
those efforts? What is our specific role in regard to the STEM Investment Council's role
Yes.
in working with these various groups?
Obviously,
And
stay focused on us, but we need to have a handle on it.
The more we're involved in that, the more we'll be a center of gravity, right? I mean, ultimately, the STEM Investment Council was created with the idea of being that central spot statewide that everything was supposed to be kind of hubbed around and coordinated from. And right now, I'd argue we're probably not in that position as strongly as we could be. So I agree with that.
This is the year.
This is the year. Yeah, all the training's been done.
It all comes down to
Yeah.
2015, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. Last piece of background information I asked Mark to prepare for, so that we just have some context, is what is the budget
Yeah.
that we do have overall, and where's the money coming? What's the recommended spend?
Yeah, in the governor's recommended budget, as the STEM Council knows, there was some challenges understanding what precisely has been earmarked in the budget for STEM. There are 2 places where, well, there's 3 places where STEM, maybe even more, but the STEM, let's get specific. One is within the OEIB agency budget. There is $6.1 million from the ETIC funds that is recommended to go to the OEIB to be managed by the STEM Investment Council. That's the way it is currently situated. There's an additional $7.9 million that is coming through the OEIB, and again, when we read OEIB, that comes to these, to the OEIB budget, and that money would be spent or allocated under the direction of the STEM Investment Council. And that is specifically to support STEM hubs and activities. The additional place that we weren't initially aware of was that within the Department of Education's agency budget, there was an additional $7.1 million that was allocated to the Department of Education for additional STEM activities and investments to be made.
But non-specific.
Non-specific. And so that realization led to, I was asked to in very short order to then put a framing around the $15 million. So the Department of Education's 7.1, OEIB's 7.9 adds up to $15 million, which is what you will see in the broader strategic investment. If you've seen the map that was presented to the OEIB and that Danny Ledesma has put forward in the public forum is $15 million in investments in STEM. That's what we're talking about, the Department of Education and the OEIB. Not reflected in that $15 million is the additional funds from ETIC, which is definitely a STEM investment. Not also reflected in that is that there's an additional $2 million for really, I wouldn't say transforming mathematics education, but it is really around my understanding, and other people have different understandings of this, so I want to just put that caveat there, is to really help with developmental mathematics and developmental language arts, developmental English. So the transition between high school and community college around placement issues, around the developmental math. How do we help people be more successful in transitioning from high school to post-secondary in math and language arts?
Does that reside in ODE or OEIB?
I don't know where that resides right now. So that I haven't seen a lot of conversations. I believe right now it's with the HAC. But there's a number of other things that play out in this, notwithstanding the $35 million that is going to career and technical education. There's a significant overlap between career and technical education as well as some of the STEM efforts right now. As you might know, this current biennium, there's $11 million in career and technical education revitalization grants, which are going out to school districts to help with equipment purchases, with starting up programs, etc. That has not, a large portion of those, about 70% of those were STEM focused. A large portion of the STEM CTE, STEAM activities from the Department of Education have an overlap with career and technical education as well.
Sure, yeah. All right, well that's
So
good
what about
background.
the smaller budget of this group, and when we start putting out things like this, who pays
Yeah.
for that?
Well, what we're going to need to do is...
Nobody wants to pay for
Well, I think that the
copies.
question...
Or
There's a number of questions that we need to wrestle with as a STEM council is how do we effectively implement these strategies that we've put forward in the investment recommendations. We do not have the capacity at the Department of Education or at the OEIB to manage $21 million of investments. We just simply do not have that capacity to do that. So how are we going to go about that? Knowing that there will be a legislative dance and a dance with the Department of Administrative Services.
Conversation to be flipped up to
staffing.
the full council probably
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that regard.
Yep.
But yes, there's no doubt.
And then other efforts, yes.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have Mark give us this overview in regards to the dollars is because the dollars does kind of define or ultimately impact our role on the advocacy side, because that's the part that we've got to support on the political side. So on the communication side, we'll talk about general marketing more. The 100,000-foot strategic is our communications, and then advocacy is when we're getting very tactical, down in the weeds
More specific
type of work.
efforts, yeah.
For very specific asks and efforts that we'll be working with. All right. So with that, any additional comment from Aubrey or Dwayne in regards to background and inductions? You guys have any other questions about that?
We're only on number 1.
Well, kind of number 2 as well. So number 2, obviously the goals in charge of this subcommittee. I know. We have a very small group here. We can vote you out.
But we still have a quorum.
All right, so goal in charge of the subcommittee, I think we have been discussing that in length as we've talked about some of the background situations. 2015, what are and what should be our top end goals, do we believe? Obviously, this is kind of the floor in regards to what we believe on the advocacy side in regards to being tactical. This is what we're going to go support and try to get taken care of. From a marketing standpoint or a communication standpoint, the next question would be, what are some of our goals in regards to that from a very top level strategic level?
So is this where we decide on what our priorities are and who we're really going to focus on?
No.
Or should we
What-
brainstorm the entire list
I
and
think
then
we-
get down
What
to
are the
that?
goals?
What are
I
the
mean,
ultimate
Oh, I
goals?
thought you had already read them.
Well, for example, what I'm hearing,
Yes.
if I might, and what I've heard from the subcommittee so far is that one goal for this committee would be to coordinate with other advocacy and communication efforts. Right? One of our goals is to how do we work most effectively with the STEM CTE Employers Coalition? How do we work most effectively with the governor's office? How do we work effectively with the Department of Education, with the OEIB to align communication strategies and efforts? Does that make sense as a...
Yeah. How do we raise awareness of STEM?
Well, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I'm not, as everybody that's dealt with me, Kyle and others, I'm not strategic. I'm a very tactical person. When we've done work with STEM Employers Coalition before, I think a lot of this ultimate top-end strategic alignment and goal setting has been essentially printed in the sense that we have an idea what messages we're trying to put out at the 100,000-foot level. I don't want to recreate the wheel too much. What we need to do is align all the other efforts and just make sure we're not speaking out with different details. So I guess one of the things from a tactical standpoint on the strategic side would be to gather up all the available materials. And you started that process obviously here, but we have additional materials that have been created from ETIC. There's additional materials that have been created from the CTE STEM Employers Coalition.
Oregon Learns.
Oregon Learns and a variety of things. We need to pull those things together and have an opportunity to filter through and make sure that we're all in alignment, or at least whatever message we decide to say is in alignment. Does that make sense?
I would also add the STEM hubs to that because I think
Yes.
they have a lot of communication efforts too that are going out. We
And
don't
they
want
have
to
communication
align.
needs too. So
Correct.
I mean, there's a lot of need within the system for communications collateral that helps them tell the story from a state perspective and then to localize the context. It helps raise their effectiveness. We can certainly, one of the things from a STEM hub perspective that we've been asking is to try to maximize media attention and legislative attention to what's going on at the ground with their activities. So they're reaching out to local media and press, getting coverage of their events, and overall that then helps raise awareness of STEM overall. What's missing is the larger context so that it's not just seen as, oh, they're doing
This
something
group's doing that
fantastic
group,
in
that's
Bend,
doing
you
that,
know,
yeah.
in Sisters they have a great thing going on. Oh, in Wilsonville they have a great thing going on. But how does this...
That would be the STEM Hub Network, right?
That's the STEM Hub Network. That's exactly right. A piece of the bigger puzzle. Absolutely. A lot of moving pieces there. But- So I think working effectively with other efforts and the STEM hubs included in that is a.
Well,
is a
Mark,
critical
to
piece.
that point, you talk strategy versus tactics. There's a strategic vision of STEM reaching every corner of the state. Okay, and when you talk to legislators, for example, they can see that parts of it don't reach their area, so they're going to be asking, well, when's my part coming? Okay, well, we need to have some answer for that. Okay, whether it's now or in the next 5 years, it needs to be in that bigger picture. So when we can actually talk tactics, we can say, okay, well, here's the roadmap. Okay, we're developing a roadmap. Would you like to have a conversation about a roadmap that has your area actually engaged? And oh, by the way, here's what you can do to actually help with that. That moves the strategy into actionable things that they can support, which can connect to the constituents in their area who will probably be pushing back if we're doing our messaging properly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is that overall strategy of moving people towards this place where STEM is everywhere and reaches every corner of the state and can reach every house and every person there. Okay, so part of our role from that strategic perspective is to kind of recognize that while that's a nice fluffy vision up there, but it's kind of messy getting to there, so that we're probably going to be doing a lot of jiggering right below that. So all these different groups that are doing different things that may see the world a little differently, it may be a little of our job to kind of shepherd them back towards that bigger goal. Okay, so when we see tactics coming out and we have our own tactics, we're tying these things together to that bigger vision and strategy. Okay, so how do you do that? It's almost that middle layer of where strategy gets implemented that actually gets ignored a lot of the time, that I think we need to focus on. So when we talking these different constituent groups about the 9 different messaging areas that we might have, it's like, okay, here's what comes out of that message. It's like, here are the actions that you can see that the strategy is being implemented. And always at least have one answer for them about what's being done. That can show up in the legislative sessions, it can show up in the STEM hubs, it can show up in all these different groups in some way, so they can see themselves being connected back to that overall strategy. Otherwise, it gets very, very messy, and everybody goes off and does their own tactics, and we have minimal results.
Yeah. To that end, two things, Dwayne. I think the one thing that you brought up is a really powerful way of spreading this, is that when people understand that, oh, in the gorge they're flying aerial drones in order to learn math. Holy cow! In Umatilla, they're doing a robotics program that's targeting their Latina students. Oh, holy cow! When people start feeling that, ooh, why aren't we doing that? That sounds really cool. STEM has a real powerful meme of student engagement and excitement and invention that goes along with it. That really, with enough exposure, really spreads rapidly. And the other piece is that we have no sort of centralized presence to actually communicate our efforts and our work and to help shine a light on what's happening in these regions. I see in all of the states, and I was just browsing Utah's this morning, it's like, holy cow, here's what these guys are doing. Here's the involvement of these different industries. Here's this. We don't have that in Oregon right now. And in a sense, without that presence, people don't take you seriously. I know it's a ridiculous thing, but there needs to be some sort of web presence, if you will, where people can go, oh, that's what's going on.
I'd suggest it's a little more.
Right.
It's a little more than that, in that there needs to be it's about infrastructure. I mean, at the end of the day, what is the infrastructure for communicating these activities and sharing them and sharing the best practices and experiences? I mean, that's the layer that, to me, that's right below the STEM hubs. As you roll these STEM hubs out, part of what should be coming along with them is the infrastructure to share the best practices, for people to know what other people are doing, for them to be able to not only see what's being done, but what may be applicable and modified that can be deployed in their industries, right? Otherwise, each of these groups of folks, or each individual city or region or school districts, are going to have to try and go do this thing themselves. You know what that ends up looking like. You end up with a dollar request from somebody for some small thing that someone may have already done, quite honestly,
Yeah.
and it's not connected to anything else.
Exactly.
So when we're thinking of how we want to support this thing on a statewide basis, there is that piece that goes along, and if you think about, we talked about the summit earlier this week, infrastructure is really important, and it's the thing that a lot of people don't really think about, right?
Not as sexy.
That's exactly right, that's exactly right.
So, a couple things. Number one, point of order, this is a small group of friends. I don't want this to be just a conversation between Aubrey, Dwayne, Mark, and I. Ladies, gentlemen on the phone.
I was just getting started.
I would encourage, Kyle was wondering whether or not she could speak up, and the answer is absolutely, Kyle. This is not a STEM, full STEM council meeting where we're trying to hold you guys off to 7 minutes at the end.
And that's public, by the way.
That's public, yes, exactly. So,
Well, and at some point, we have to also
Yes.
discuss who else should be a part of this conversation.
absolutely. So, not to inject a couple things. Number one, this requires a significant amount of money. And that's something you're going to need to talk to your boss about. If we, this council, are going to decide to be any sort of central fulcrum of marketing efforts and coordination and putting out significant materials and putting up a website and doing all these things, we're going to have to find budget to be able to do so. Joe's very familiar. OPAS, which was just a small little piece of ETIC's efforts with the K through 12 pipeline around STEM, would drop significant money in printing flyers and 2-page things and putting up websites and everything else, and it's expensive, obviously, just because we're talking about a large state. The other issue here is we're K through 20, right? And all of a sudden, just by simply doing this, we have different messages, different marketing materials, different everything for the two different major silos that we deal with, even though we have tried to stay in one silo, right? But at the same time, our message has to change as we move through elementary, middle school, high school, community colleges, et cetera. So there's a lot of money to be spent here. There are professional, I'm looking across this room, and nobody here is a marketing and PR specialist, except for maybe this young lady over here. And unless you want to get tasked massively here, you might want to flee. We're going to probably need some help, professional help in regards to doing this.
Can I just say something too? I know this is details, and this may be a different off topic, but I think this is supposed to be a subcommittee work group. So I just want to say it now. And it's only because I used to work with Melissa very closely on the Portland Metro STEM partnership, and people are bombarded with crap.
Yes.
Yes.
And so printing this stuff, while it's nice, and I'm sure there will be some cases where you have to do that, and you can send out links to websites and whether people go and see them and whether they look at them. So my whole point is that, you pay somebody the big bucks to make it zingy and pretty, as it should be, because people don't want to go to a flat and, forgive me, an ODE website. I'm sorry. Not your fault. But who does? And I mean, I think,
Who does?
I'm very proud of the Portland Metro STEM Partnership website because it's pretty and you want to look at it and you want to hang out there for a while. I mean, that's the whole point. It's got lots of pictures. So just as an idea, I don't know who's taking notes, but maybe an idea to really shift the focus is, Domes, where are those kids that are doing this stuff in school, and make them do it?
That's where I was
Whether
going
and
with
make it
it,
an internship and hit all cylinders, and these kids are driving the Oregon STEM.
Sure.
That's a strategy.
Just like Audrey.
I want to throw that out as
Just
an
like-
idea because I just get all wound up about how difficult it is
I know, and expensive.
to get the word out to people. Like, we can talk about who needs it and who, but who's going to pay attention?
And trust me,
Wayne, how many emails do you open a day?
Emails,
So that you get my point, and I know you guys are all familiar with it, but I just think, let's do it differently. Let's make a statement. Let's use these kids that are doing this stuff to help spread the word.
I mean, if
I don't know, as an idea.
If I can comment for a second, specifically, an outstanding example of that is the Intel support of the Girls Get It program, where those girls become the advocates. They develop the curriculum, they teach the summer programs, and we pay those girls and honor those girls because they were involved in STEM, and it makes them a bigger advocate. It's a whole different way of looking at it. But
I'd rather hear
for-
from the students than
Yeah.
you.
And when the kids go, I agree. I never taught it. Well, just some of the safety.
Thank you.
So there's marketing, at least within my own company, is something that is a constant battle on how much do you do. The moment I produce a product flyer is the moment it's outdated, right? The moment that I find a closet full of boxes of my marketing flyers that cost $50,000 to do.
You send it to a corporation, your final year-end report, you're like, why does a nonprofit spend this much money on something like this?
Exactly. So I absolutely agree. We need to probably dust off our copy of guerrilla marketing and take a look at some of the innovative ways that we can do this. Same time, we have to have certain pieces that are locked and very professionally done, because we will be presenting to people who
Absolutely.
still value that and
Absolutely.
represent that as a token barrier to be able to participate. So we will need to have that for legislators, for governors, for those types of people as we approach them.
There are different
Yeah.
There are different reasons for communications and marketing
Yep.
and PR.
Exactly.
One is to establish credibility. So there's things that we need to do to establish credibility. When we think about messaging, who conveys the message and how is that conveyed is an important piece of any sort of
Yep.
marketing.
Students to
So
students.
using students to convey messaging is a very huge piece of this. However, the students, and maybe even using students to actually build some of this, is also an interesting idea. However, they're not going to be having the strategic, how are we driving the marketing campaign in a different way, and what the purpose is, and how do we distinguish that? That's the realm of professionals who understand these different pieces. It's like everyone can be a graphic designer. Everybody knows education because they've gone through the education system. Everybody understands marketing because you get flyers all the time. So it's not, those are fallacious things. And Kyle, you had something
Yep.
that you've been trying to
I
interject
just
here.
have a couple of reflections. It seems to me that what really resonates with me is the notion of trying to prioritize and target. And it seems to me, in my experience, the foundation of every communication effort is research. What do we know about the messages out there? What do we know about what legislators think?
Yes.
What do we know about what parents think, et cetera? And maybe that's research we need to do. Maybe that's research that has been done, really well already. Because we really can't change those perceptions. We really can't target and prioritize until we understand
Right.
what we're trying to change. And the other thing I would say, it seems that we have a couple of jobs. There's the big job of what is STEM. I still think people don't know what that means. It's I think that it's difficult for us to penetrate sometimes because it's kind of an elite higher ed thing. So we sort of put it over in higher ed. And it's also the, academically gifted kids that will do all right already, and a number of other perceptions. So part of it, people just don't know what it is. So there's that job before you can get to the job of, and here's what we want you to do about it. It seems like those are on different strata. And then the final comment I wanted to make, I would love to look at the whole CTE, the success of the CTE wave. The truth is, people do know what CTE is. CTE is the most popular thing around right now. Every lawmaker we talk to supports it. Parents get this. I think educators are largely familiar with it. There's something about CTE that they can touch and feel and understand and support. And STEM, it's sort of a slippery piece of that. It kind of slips off in my experience. Many people get that they go together. The business community certainly does. We've been working really hard to make that case. Our friends in the CTE, traditional CTE world, they certainly get it. But the general public, many lawmakers, many politicians, et cetera, still don't quite understand how it goes together. And I would argue we're even sort of putting them in silos the way we're talking about it. We're meeting today, and then this afternoon I'm going to a CTE meeting. And so that doesn't make sense. So I would like us to just see what happened with CTE. Part of it, I think, is it's in K-14. Part of it, people had some experience with it. They know shop class. They know home ec. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I think there's an element of that. So it would be good to just reflect on what worked so well to come from, almost gone to now. It's people get it, support it, and how could we learn from that?
Perfect transition on number 3. We've already kind of broached that topic here and starting to talk about doing an inventory of other efforts. And CTE is certainly right on there. STEM hubs. We have the STEM Employers Coalition, now STEM CTE Employers Coalition. We need to understand what ETIC's been doing
Isn't
and
there
what's
gonna be a
effective.
CTE council too?
We'll get into that whole piece. There's other legislative efforts we need to make sure we understand what's tactically happening in regards to legislative asks, so that we can all, make sure that,
Advocacy side.
figure out what we're going to prioritize again and what we're going to support, what we're not going to support, et cetera. So outside of those things that I just mentioned, so we have STEM hubs, we have the STEM CTE Employers Coalition, we have ETIC, we have the work that OPAS traditionally did so we have the Lego robotics folks, and we have what's the FL, the large robots?
FFL.
FRC.
FRC. What other efforts are going on around STEM that people know of?
There's a connecting education and career transition
Right.
budget implementation team.
Governor's team,
They
governor's
report-
office.
yeah, report to
And
the
connecting,
governor.
It's
focused
that's right, we
largely
meet
on
today, don't we?
CTE
We meet this afternoon.
Yes, I forgot about that.
Oregon Computer Science Teachers Association, traditional teacher
Mhm.
training through SuperQuest and all of that.
Mhm.
That's a very grassroots.
Mhm.
And Betty Comp has put in a bill on that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Try to
So-
provide statewide training and support to actually get the implementation.
So
Yes.
those are organizations. What other organizations are in the inventory and regard other efforts that are moving, so that we could, this is one of the very first things we need to do, is go out and look at all their materials, look at all their messaging, make sure we understand what they're
Project
doing.
Lead the Way.
Project Lead the Way.
And Fairly
So
Advocacy.
ODE has a long series of STEM efforts outside.
Okay, so here's where I see us jumping into tactics, where I'm
Yeah.
wondering where the
Yeah.
strategy that goes along with that is, right? So, because I don't know how many of you, all of you've probably been in efforts where we've jumped in and done exactly this type of thing before, and we'll put a list together, and it'll be going out of date the minute that it's done, and there'll be nobody to take care of it in the future, and then we'll do it again. Okay, so I wonder, is there somebody or somebodies who could own this? In other words, whether it's the Department of Education, whether it's somebody else that would actually just really own the inventory of those different organizations and say, I have that list, and if you're not on it, talk to me.
Yeah, for me, the reason to do the inventory is to understand their strategic messaging and missions and that things, yeah. So that we can steal all the right verbiage and everything else. I'm a firm believer of not doing my own work. Other people have already done it. And then, yes, then we have the next more strategic piece. How do we keep in contact with these people? How do
But
we?
somebody may have already done this, that's
Yeah.
the other part of it.
Right. Yeah, I know other people have done this at certain levels, yes. 'Cause I've done it myself at other certain levels. So I know ETIC's done most of this work. OPAS did a lot of this work once upon a time under Joe and Bruce Schaefer's work. I mean, we are treading again in waters that have been swimming before.
Mark, what's your thought? Good try.
No, I have two thoughts. I think, one, I'm still responding to Kyle in my head about why CTE is being successful, and
Well, I didn't want to I could dive
So-
30 minutes on that conversation.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm letting go of that
Yeah.
a little bit, but it's part of a pendulum swing within
Yeah.
education itself. The overview of other efforts, I think we need to be very strategic about how are we aligning efforts that are currently going on. And the three that seem to me to rise to the top without getting to the programmatic level or the implementation level is really the coordination efforts with the governor's office and transition team. That's a critical piece to be aware of, and how they're speaking about career and technical education in STEM, and how that will be going forward into the next legislative session. The other very large and significant piece of work is the revitalization of the STEM CTE Employers Coalition, which is nice to see, and very happy that is taking place, and certainly the work that ETIC has done in the past to lay the foundation and the arguments for why should we invest in a particular part of the system. because that message has previously resonated very, very strongly. So those three efforts as a whole, I believe, are probably the most significant and most pertinent to what we're doing right now. There's other programmatic pieces that go along with our strategies around raising awareness around engineering or computer science or around mathematics. There's certainly the hubs are a critical piece of the implementation infrastructure and flowing back from what's on the ground to the state, and what sort of support do they need in order to help frame their messaging. I think that is a piece of this as well. But everything that I've heard is help us, frame and articulate these messages to different constituency groups, and then let us know how can we help in that. Is that fair, Melissa? What would you say to that? It's not like they have the capacity to develop communications advocacy. This is the same thing that happened at Washington STEM as well. What we heard from the hubs up there were three things that they wanted. One, funding and sustainable funding. Okay. Two, and then get out of our way. Communications, help us communicate so that we can build the advocacy efforts on the ground locally and create a statewide messaging so that we come across as being a part of it, not this tacked on special thing. And then three, help us with data and metrics so that we can help evidence this and feed into it. So those were the three big things that the hubs, and I have heard nothing different from the hubs here in Oregon. Same major needs about the role of the state in that regard. I mean, there's some other pieces, but.
So advocacy for the money, right? Marketing on the other pieces.
And data, yeah.
And data.
Yeah, but we're doing that.
Which makes sense.
I like that.
So, I mean, do we want to hear from Kyle and also with the governor's transition team where things stand, on two of the big things? And
Well, I think
since both of you are part of that conversation, three of us are part of that conversation.
yeah, you were in on the governor's task force, right? And Kyle was on the phone call, if I remember right.
And I am,
And
and
you
you
were,
are.
and I
Four of
was,
us are in
and Jill
that.
was on. Yeah. Well, as disorganized as we are, I would argue that the leadership isn't much more organized. And they're trying, but they're doing what's necessary to pull it together, right? But they're about the same exact first step, stumble, whatever you want to say, in this journey as well. I think, and I would argue that my perception on where they are is that they're even newer to this, obviously, and not even as bought in certain aspects of this. So they're doing it because they know there's a groundswell of support.
Reactive.
They're being reactive, yes, as opposed to proactive. Right? That would be my argument. Are you agreeing, Dwayne? They're being extreme. Oh crap! Here we go. This actually has some political movement. We need to deal with this, and hopefully not just deal with it, but then do something with it very, very positive. And so that's where we are. We're in that delicate stage of making sure that it's a positive thing that's long term, as opposed to just a make it go away kind of thing, or control it kind of thing. That's my read on what the governor's up to and Danny's up to.
And I'll add to that I think that there's a desire to meld the STEM and CTE in people's minds together in a way that they can get the traction that CTE is getting. Okay, so not quite sure how to do that, but there's an interest in saying, okay, well, there's a train that's moving and it seems to be picking up speed. Can we actually stick that STEM stuff there and kind of have it go along with it so that people might see it in a broader?
Redhead stepchild.
Yeah, it's not. It's your flesh and blood. It's not the redheaded stepchild. Come on. So I think that the languaging, the messaging that could be behind the CTME STEM conversation could come out of that group. And I think that it could broaden the coalition of people that would be interested in the work that we're doing here. But I don't think the folks in that room really understand enough about what this is to even really make a good swing at that,
Yeah.
is my view.
So I realize I get the similarities, but how do you meld the two because they're so big separately?
STEM CT?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get the similarity, and I do think that they need to be tacked on to each other, but I think it needs to be.
Complementary.
It's like a delicate balance
Mhm.
of, because one's gonna get lost.
Well, I think,
Just
obviously,
like- Just like the T does in STEM.
right, there you go. I would argue at the K through 12 level, it's not a big deal on the CTE mission. I think that's where I don't see it having much difficulty working together very cleanly, actually. I think where it blows up is when you get into individual degree programs and certificates that you move through a post-secondary experience with. I think that's where things start to get very difficult because you're dealing with very entrenched programs and you have to choose something where CTE and STEM, I mean, when you're doing a CTE class, you're using math and you're using science, you're using engineering, and when you're doing an engineering class, you're using more shop skills and classical CTE skills. So there is a big question, and we're not going to handle this because there is, as you previously mentioned, there's a legislative concept to create a STEM investment or a CTE investment council. There's a bunch of other things that we have to deal with at some level, but
We'll try this on, because this is where I think the biggest rub is. It's really time to impact. In other words, CTE, people get in their mind the idea of somebody swinging a hammer, fixing a car, putting a tool belt on, and going out and doing something relatively soon.
mm-hmm.
Okay, whereas when you talk STEM, it's like, well, when is this STEM stuff going to actually, when are we going to see something that comes out of that STEM stuff? Well, if it means you go to high school and college and get a degree or several degrees, and then you might do something, that's kind of a long time. And in some cases, as we know, that there are a fair number of people that never continue in those areas anyway, even though the skills that they're developing are applied. So it's almost like the CTE has some tangible, visible results that people can see in a relatively shorter period of time, whereas the STEM stuff, not so much.
Well, and not to do the 30 minutes on why I think CTE is being successful, but to do a minute on it. To a great degree, it's nostalgic. People in power think back to what they had when they were in school, because most people that are in power at this time had CTE classes in school. 10 years from now, the people in power won't have had CTE classes in school. It won't
And
be
it's
as big of an
killing
issue.
our economy.
And it's killing our economy in the sense that there's some needs. Well, except for and then now that you just hit, Aubrey just hit something that I think most people don't realize is what is CTE today versus what it was when we did it, right? Because we're not reinvesting in a lot of wood shops, right? And foundries and automobile repair shops. That's not necessarily what CTE is going to be when it's reinvested. Some of it will be there, I'm sure. But
I hope so.
Yeah, but it's not as classical as that, right?
It's beyond that.
It's beyond that.
Yeah.
So, and I think, again, it's nostalgic. You mentioned it before, everybody has a touchstone to CTE, right?
I think it's deeper,
Yeah.
honestly. I think what we're wrestling with, you said it's easier at the K-12. I almost disagree. I mean, I do disagree with that because there is in the post-secondary space, one is the perception, actually, Dwayne, that you just said as well, that CTE is about the middle 40 and STEM is about 4+ year degrees. Is that something that the STEM Council is saying? Is that something that we agree with? Are we going to define STEM as being about 4-year degrees and beyond?
No.
Or are we going? So we have to be cautious about that, about how we speak about that. So that adds to it. Within the K-12 system, there's a deeply held belief because of 100 years of history where career and technical education was about people who are going to be dropping out in 8th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade and going in and working in a factory and getting a job right away. Okay, that became the less than option in K-12. It is still considered a less than option because there's there's academics and CTE, there's content and application. And that, we have to be very cognizant that that is a deep, deep divide within K-12. CTE teachers are not allowed to teach a math class because their certification is a less than certification than what currently exists for math teachers. Most of our teachers in our system have gone through the academic track, gone into post-secondary, and then back in. So they are from the academic track. That gets reinforced within the culture of K-12. And so when we start talking about, ease of the great CTE teachers get sidelined and encapsulated within the system. They are not allowed to the freedom to actually be working with the math and the science teachers. Math and science teachers, that's all about academics and passing the damn test. Okay? This is reinforced by our accountability systems as well. So what's resonating for people is, I believe, this notion that, wow, education actually should be connected to reality. And that we're seeing people who are graduated from our system who cannot actually work in industry and think for themselves and actually apply it. And oh, God, where did they actually learn those skills previously? It was in the shop classes. It was tinkering. It was application. And now we're suddenly realizing, 25 years on, that we're producing generations that actually aren't contributing in the way that we need them to contribute to. So that, to me, is what's really resonating, is that people are learning stuff that doesn't really matter. And we're putting a whole lot of emphasis. So it's a swing back to the applied.
And unfortunately, the kids know it.
Oh, yeah. Immediately. Yeah. Why haven't we changed our graduation rate? For exactly that reason. Because it doesn't matter. Anyway.
Joe?
You also need to be careful in that there are national CTE groups whose messaging is CTE is your STEM strategy. Sure. And especially since that hits mostly at high school, you're going to end up with reinforcing that CTE is for the middle 40.
Yep.
And not that STEM is our transformation to leverage off the experience of CTE as hands-on, applied.
It's it's the skill set. It's the toolbox so you can do the other.
CTE sees STEM as a threat.
Yes.
Right, for people within the CTE, they do.
That.
I mean, largely because CTE has been that less than option. They're saying, hey, you're talking about hands-on learning in STEM. We've been doing it forever, and we've been dissed for it. Hey, pay attention to us. We are this strategy. You are a strategy. Great, but it can't be the whole strategy.
Okay.
Well, and I think that gets back to this fundamental understanding of what is STEM, what is CTE. It isn't a wood shop. It isn't, it could be that, but it is much more than that. And I think part of the work that we're talking about when we talk about CTE, I believe, maybe I'm making an assumption here, that it's about these high-wage, high-demand careers, okay? There are a lot of CTE courses and pathways that are important and will still get funding, but they may not be the priority of the work that we do in terms of trying to communicate how CTE and STEM come together.
Yeah.
So the journalism degree or the legal
Early
degree, early child, those are important by all means, but if we're going to target and segment and try to have the biggest impact. And I just think that, these labels we put on it get in the way.
They do.
I don't think students think of it this way.
Well,
And so is this CTE or STEM? If somebody goes to Treehouse and earns, that and earns their badge and they're put to work as a software coder and they don't have a degree. Is that a middle 40? Is that at the top 40? Is that
STEM,
CTE? Is that STEM? I don't think it really matters, at least to me. But it does matter to different constituencies. So partly, I'd love to just blow up those labels, help people understand that it's about skills.
Are there any national
necessarily
trends to
degrees.
do just that? Blow up the acronym? Anybody know?
Blow up the what?
The acronym, other than add an
Not
A to
yet.
STEM?
There's,
Not among us adults
Yeah.
and us,
Let's have that
we
conversation.
policymakers.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I really don't believe that young people look at it in this way. I don't think they know if they're in a CTE effort or a STEM effort, or they just know they're doing cool science and math
Stuff.
and
You're
Cool
you're
stuff.
absolutely
yeah,
right.
cool
Yeah.
stuff.
Let's call it
They know
cool
if they get to
stuff.
touch something.
So, you know, and
And make-
part of it is putting a face
Let's call it
to
cool
it,
stuff.
helping people
Mhm.
understand what it
STEM and
is.
CTE.
So,
I'd like to ask how you explain STEM to Michelangelo
Yeah.
and get him to actually take you seriously,
mhm.
right? It's like, he'd just look at you like you just fell out of the sky because it would make no sense.
yeah.
Right.
Right, and that's, I think that's the reality of it, is like, if you're doing this stuff, and you're having experiences around it, and there's valuable tools you can actually have to add to that experience.
Mhm.
I think that's the thing that we're trying to grapple with and fund. We don't really have a good way to do that. And, oh, by the way, for many folks, it's a zero-sum game, so they want the dollars to go into their silos so they can do what they want to do or have been doing already or think should be done.
Mhm.
So it takes it back to our conversation on advocacy and communication, right? There's a communication conversation that it has when you're talking about show up. And there's the advocacy to actually get the dollars to show up and go to the place and support what you're talking about.
But I think first they have to get this piece, because
Well,
their notion of what it means, so then down here at the investment level, they're saying,
Is that-
I don't really get this.
is that true?
I don't think that's, my perception of the whole thing is when I go talk to legislators, the ones that get it, and the ones that don't will never get it. And hopefully we have a more powerful people that get it, because they're the ones that are gonna run the caucus and get the other ones to vote.
31.
It doesn't even matter. It's 6. There are 6 people in the Senate that
That's
do
true.
everything
That is
in the
true.
Senate.
That's
There
true.
are 10 people in the House of Representatives that get the herd to do the rest on this issue. And I don't know if we have to necessarily, you market to all, but you don't necessarily spend a ton of time on about 2/3 of them. And now we're getting into advocacy, we're getting into tactics and strategy
Right.
to push our agenda through. I think it's great, we need to have the groundswell, and we have groundswell very strong from employers right now, right? The strongest I have ever seen it. We've done a great job over the last few years at many different levels, the STEM Employers Coalition, all that work that's been done at the business summits. A tremendous amount of time, money, and effort's been spent on the business side. Business people get it. And frankly, from an advocacy side, if you just have business in this state, you can go get those 6 votes, and you can go get those caucuses, and you can push some things down onto the system, but the system may not receive them, right? So how do we build the ground up more than just one special interest, which is business? So how do we get the parents, frankly, and how we get the students, because that's what really matters, right? Are those 2
So we're
things.
talking about how we brand it, and
How
I
we
agree,
brand
the acronym actually can be
Yeah.
problematic for us, or we can see it as
Yeah.
advantageous for us. It's convenient right now. There's huge problems with it as an acronym, okay? So let's acknowledge that, but let's leverage it for what it does represent.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about that is common here? And to me, it comes down to what are the outcomes what are the skills, attitudes, and dispositions we're trying to engender within our education system that will lead to productivity, later on, both individual as well as in industry productivity. And it is,
Pull up your slide.
Yep.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's
So-
that word cloud.
I love these conversations, and I could go 3 hours on this. All right, everybody knows I get more energy the more I talk, not less. So,
Yay for us.
yay for you. You introverts in the room are all slowly shrinking into their chairs, where I'm going to get more and more jazzed about talking. Thing is, we've talked about this. Every single person in this room has had this conversation already. Every single
So
person.
will you
So-
work plan then?
Well, the point being
Well, I think
this.
define our constraints.
Yes.
We have to define our constraints,
Exactly.
and we have to define the constituencies that we're targeting, and what are our messages
And
to
then
those.
prioritize, because we have something right now. If this was a year ago, we could have a different conversation than we need to have right now, because in 3 weeks, the legislative session starts. And we have this money that has been allocated in the governor's budget, by no sense of imagination, is solid, right? I think we have a really good chance at it, but the governor's budget is just a recommendation. It's the legislatures who legislate. They're the ones that appoint, and they're the ones that appropriate. We have to have our marketing in place to be able to go forward on the short term. Long term, there's other things that we can do. But on the short term, we have a mission, and a very, very tactical one that has to be completed by June of this year.
Well, I'm going to get back to what Aubrey brought up a little while ago, which is, to do this right, it takes work, and it needs to be done right. Okay, so I actually have run a marketing company before. I actually have a minor in marketing, unfortunately. So
Careful, you're about to become
Done.
chair.
Done and done.
I am so not going to do that. But here's the thing, okay? If
And
you
don't
want-
send any emails, just go off and do it.
If you want to actually have this stuff work properly, you need to build, you have the dollars to do it, and you have to have a goal in mind. Okay, so how do you manage this message across many years? Because it's going to really take to do this, and it's going to change. Who's going to actually have the focus and ability to be able to manage that message? Given the governor's going to change, the legislature's going to change, the people running these organizations are going to change, but the message needs to be consistent, okay? And, oh, by the way, you need to actually have wins showing up on a regular basis, okay?
Who's
So
showing up?
Wins.
Oh.
Wins. Okay, so where are the wins going to show up and that are going to be trumpeted to show that this is actually having impact? It doesn't have to have huge impact, but it has to be shown. Someone has to be able to point and say, oh, that activity that you folks are doing, that's really valuable because, and insert the kid, insert the teacher, insert the parent, insert the whatever you need to actually have to make that message, tangible and reachable by a broader community. Is that us that does that? Is that somebody that works with us?
Yeah, you're poking on a very good thing, because what was the ultimate purpose of the STEM Investment Council, right? Was it to do the work? No.
Gotcha.
It was to advise others to do the work, right? It was to push, and it was the legislators' effort to influence the existing systems, be it the governor's office and the priorities there, be it the education or higher education departments, right? I mean, that was the idea, is they wanted a squeaky wheel to come in and say, this is what we think needs to be done, and have some level of influence to be able to do it. To be part of it, to make it our own mission, I think we should advocate, and we have to have materials to do so, but to own it and to be the focal point,
That's a lot.
it's too much for we don't have budget, we don't have a mandate, no one has to technically listen to us. We have influence primarily for one reason only, and that's because the legislators put us here. And if we do what they are looking for, then we'll continue to have influence. If we don't, we'll disappear.
So the STEM Council could certainly recommend the establishment of, similar to other states, the establishment either of a nonprofit or working with a nonprofit to fund various efforts around this, whether it is through the Department of Education, whether in terms of grants management, or establishing something outside of the education system that works alongside the education system. There's a number of things that we could do as a council to make recommendations in terms of, I think, back to your previous point, in terms of short-term getting legislative support, I think that there's a sense of urgency around that, and that's a nice priority to focus our efforts right now, knowing that there's some long-term things that we need to work out. There's some tactics that we can start discussing, perhaps at this meeting even. As I mentioned previously, getting legislators to understand the impact that STEM is already having in their communities is probably the single most important thing that I can think of to get them to believe and support the STEM efforts. We can go to them one-on-one and talk to them as adults to adults, but in terms of what's making a difference, getting them to go visit a school, to get them to see the quadcopters being flown in the gorge, those are things that they're going to say, holy cow, my kids are engaged, they're going to be successful, this is the right damn thing for us to be doing, and get support. There's that, plus then working with the Oregon Business Council and the STEM Employers Coalition and the Governor's Transition Team to make sure that certain aspects of our messaging are solid and sound in that. I think that tripod of tactics to address our legislative agenda is probably pretty sound. Are there other aspects to that we can do, or let's poke with that to get very tangible out there?
Okay, so there's one thing I see that's that we can consistently do, which is get money and make sure that it goes somewhere that is recognizably impactful to that group of legislators. We can do that.
Yep.
Okay, and how we do that is we actually, we know how to do this, we go and talk to them, and they'll tell us what's important to them. Okay, we can actually bring some things up that we think come out of our STEM, portfolio. But this is what I learned doing the Small Business Advisory Council. You go around to different areas, it looks different on the ground everywhere. Okay, and those folks have people calling them on the phone, telling them what the problems are. We don't hear any of that. Okay, so for us to actually listen to them and say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Here's some things you might want to ask your folks that you can actually help us help you do your job. I actually had this conversation with Cliff at the summit on Tuesday. He's very interested in having a conversation about, and he wants help around STEM because he doesn't get it. He'll tell you he doesn't get it, and many of them tell you they don't get it. So if we can help them get it and help them make sure that they're not wasting their time and their money, that's a huge value.
Give them something.
Yeah.
All right. We have
Talking points.
35 minutes before we're supposed to adjourn. To move us kind of into the next phase of this, I'll pull out one of my favorite quotes, and it's basically a good plan implemented today is better than a perfect plan implemented tomorrow or never implemented. We can't get around miring the problem here again, ladies and gentlemen. We know what we need to do here. We've all talked this thing to death over the last 6 years. My favorite quote ever was at the Intel Symposium when a gentleman from Intel's education corporate office walked in and started talking about that he can show you the STEM implementation plans from the 60s and from the 70s and from the 80s and from the 90s and from the 2000s.
Carlos?
It was Carlos.
Yes.
He's like,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, we've studied this to death. We've talked about this to death. It's about doing this, right? Not this business summit, the previous business summit, the tone on the stadium, the board was, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about this to death. It's about action. It's about creating the STEM Investment Council. It's time to get busy, right?
So what's the work plan?
That's it. Let's get.
We've been busy.
I
Can you
think.
just jot down what our
Exactly.
action requirements are so we can
So
go.
work in a timeline and actually do something?
Yes.
I think I heard Dwayne volunteer to.
Be doing all marketing? Yeah.
No marketing whatsoever. Volunteered for.
Because we all know what the challenges and some of the perceptions are, and we
Did
all.
we get to what our priorities are? Did we get to?
So we have.
Short-term priority, get legislative support.
Yep. Get the money.
Get
In
the
3
money.
weeks?
Yep.
No.
Is that
No.
the
So
timeline?
Start the company.
obviously the timeline, session starts in February, ends at probably the last day of June, if it's like anything normal, or even goes longer.
Short-term.
Almost everything that is involved in our asks are going to be probably March, April, May kind of conversations, if
So
not.
will this group meet again and then the next
We're
meeting
gonna
can be
meet-
focused on what that is, Mark?
We're going to meet monthly, yeah.
Hang on.
That's
So
Yeah.
already
would that be
happened.
like our next agenda instead of doing all of this again, but actually working on
Well,
that
let's
advocacy? Is that how you want to structure this? Because I don't want to come back here next month and do this again.
Talk about it again.
No. I think
Okay.
that the council, this subcommittee needs to define what do you want to accomplish, and
So-
on what time frame, and how do we do other. I think there's a piece of this that I've heard about coordinating with other efforts.
Right, absolutely.
So what are we going to do?
So, I get a couple recommendations. Number one is an inventory of what we have, right, which you did, in regards to marketing materials that we're going to need on the short term, right? We need to have a 1 or 2 pager in regards to describing what the situation around STEM is. We need to have probably some other supporting FAQs done.
My assumption is it's
Yep.
already done by that group.
Exactly.
Is that right?
And so therefore,
I-
understand what we
That
have,
group.
and then ultimately, my first recommendation would be bring the other groups in with what they've got, and we have a meeting about it, right? And then we do a work session where I guess, are we
To
gonna?
avoid the thing, could Kyle call the meeting?
Yeah, well,
The thing.
Or
The public
thing.
meeting law.
I
thing.
The thing.
Yes,
I'm on
that
a
could work.
recorder, I wanted to,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We have to get a packet. Packets exist, right? How many, you've got your materials pretty much set for STEM CTE for the session?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We do.
E-TIC,
or I guess before
yeah.
we throw that, Kyle, is that something that you would be willing to do?
To convene a meeting.
Yeah.
To do what?
I mean, the STEM.
Well, he's just saying, get this group together, talk about what they have and what they can share or what.
Clone.
It just seems to me like the count,
The CTE STEM Employer Coalition.
The coalition.
Yes.
has a lot of what Eric's talking about.
Mhm.
Can this group feed into that, what they're preparing, and
Absolutely.
Or
I
does
think
that
we-
make you
I
feel
think we've
uncomfortable?
supplied a lot of information to date, and
It's in your materials. Some of it, I mean, some of it's evolved. We published it.
No, I get that.
in a
I'm just
different
like-
format.
So,
yeah.
I don't see
We-
why the four of us would need to recreate something that's already like that.
We
Mark,
need-
are you okay with that?
I'm,
hang on. Do we believe that we
Okay.
need to have our own STEM Investment Council branded marketing
That's
materials?
what I was gonna ask. Who is your voice? Who are you speaking on
Because,
behalf of?
again, this
Well,
goes,
now you're talking about marketing materials versus advocacy, and this is what I think you put together is advocacy.
Mhm.
What the papers that I've read is directly towards Salem, directly towards
Yeah,
that group.
that is our.
and the
Right?
framing of what those materials have been
is
it-
strategic.
is very, it conveys, it's building off of what the OEIB and the governor has already put forward in terms of connecting, education to careers. So in essence, it's already bridged several constituencies already in how it's been framed and developed.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily see, unless we have a separate advocacy agenda, which I'm not sure that we do, if there's something missing from there that we would like to also reinforce, we can.
So, not to talk power, but to talk power, if you want to strengthen our mission, our brand, and our everything, we need to have materials that say STEM Investment Council recommended agenda for state STEM education, and it could be almost identical, and it should be to other efforts, but we're going to be asked to testify. Pyro is going to be asked to testify in a number of committees during this session associated with what we do as a STEM Investment Council. And the last thing I don't want to do is just hand them the STEM employers playbook, right?
Okay.
And materials. I think we need to have our own materials. They could say almost the same exact thing, and they should, because if we're in alignment, but I think you're going to need it to be from us.
Well, I thought that I read at one point in time that Jim Pyro is also the co-chair of the coalition, so I don't.
You can't, be careful, the moment you confuse the two, our mission is not identical to their mission, I don't believe. They're focused on employers, right?
We are, yes. Our job is to mobilize employers to advocate for STEM and CTE.
And let's be
E-TIC.
honest, if you say that too loudly to some folks, they have a big problem. with it.
Exactly. So, I think STEM Investment Council has, I think, the highest STEM mission global message to pitch, right? Of all of these things at more equitable than poking on a particular one of them. STEM Employers has one very specific ask.
We're
and they should
advocating for their agenda.
Yep. E-TIC and that group of employers is not fully in line with that or this, and they'll be going to be coming in with their own materials, but they're going to be very similar to those and these, and I think, again, but they'll be branded differently most likely.
What do we need to do?
Well, that my comment is if you have three groups presenting in front of the legislators,
Should be
all
aligned.
on the same topic and on this with similar materials and similar messaging, it's better than just putting all of your eggs in one, no matter how great of an egg it is.
What do we need to do?
Just relax. I think we're getting there. Read between the lines, make some conclusions, make some connections. So I would argue.
Is your platform, though, your agenda the same as what the governor has proposed
No.
in his recommended budget?
No, not on the E-TIC
So I
side.
need the STEM Investment Council.
Yes.
Yes, we have to be
So
essentially.
could you just put that then on a piece of paper with your logo and then you have your piece?
Right, right.
You're close, but we have.
In there on there, this is where our agenda and goals overlaps with STEM
Yeah.
employers. This is where we overlap with ETIC. This is where we overlap with ODE's Common Core.
STEM Investment Council has the opportunity, though, we have to support the governor's budget, but that doesn't mean we can't sit there and say we would really like to see additional efforts in these areas, right? Additional dollars in the future, because we're advisory. We're not here to just parrot whatever the governor wants and what Danny wants. That is absolutely not our job, and if it is, I'm quitting tomorrow, right? We're here to fight for something that others maybe aren't interested in doing.
So maybe that's the key right there. And if you look at the idea behind investment, I'm going to use the I in investment here. We're about dollars being deployed to this effort, period. Okay, so people might have ideas of how they like to see things done, how they want to see things done, what they think the right way it is, but that's not really what we're about. We're about advising them where they put their money. Okay, so we can look at what she has, we can look at what ETIC says, but we want to make sure, number one, that the legislature is actually allocating dollars, period. Okay, so the answer 0 is not an okay answer. Okay, so there needs to be some investment in this work. And here are the places we think you should be investing.
I honestly, when it comes to the recommended budget, we say very nice thank you for where we agree with them, and we say we wish we had more here, and here,
Right.
because this is what we're trying to accomplish. And that's the STEM investment. If that's the testimony, if I'm asked as a STEM investment, that's my testimony, is that.
So that actually, if we took that approach, it would change what we would say, what our communication goals would be. Because if we say we really are the people that are here to A, make sure there are dollars in the pot to be spent on these efforts, and B, make sure that you're aware that these dollars are important to have. The rest of the messaging around the how, the what STEM is, what CTE, it's interesting, but that's not really what we're focused on. So it's about allocations, really.
I think we have to understand that the STEM Investment Council is still fairly nascent in our work, that we are not, we're asking for support without actually putting a lot of details behind how those investments would be deployed. We haven't yet fully articulated the reasons why should you invest in us. And so to me, I think we have to be not cautious, but we have to be mindful that when people start probing, if we're doing Shark Tank, which essentially is a legislative thing, and they start poking at us, I'm not sure we have sufficient answers to the questions that I would ask us.
Well, I'd argue we do for $15 million.
For 15 million, I think
Not for
we
100
do.
million
For
or a
100
billion.
million, we don't.
No, yes.
And we haven't yet, as a council, brought enough advisors to the table to help us understand what the needs at a deep system level are. If we're going to invest $200 million, within an education system, where is that going to be? And what is going to shift the levers? And I really don't think that we have, pardon?
I said nothing until the structure changes.
Well, we could say nothing until the structure changes, and we could certainly do that and say we're going to put our eggs into out-of-school time and post-secondary. Absolutely. We can certainly do some of those things.
Well, again, I don't want to dive too far, but because we're now down to 23 minutes before we're done today. It goes back to the conversations that I and Jill and others in a leadership position had to get the STEM Investment Council created, right? The governor did not create it. The governor wasn't even supportive of it. It was a legislative ask, it was a legislative push, it was completely there, right? They are our primary constituency. They're the ones that have the money, they're the ones that have the votes, they're the ones that are looking to us to have done something meaningful and positive. That said, they stuck us in OEIB, right, which puts us in a situation of we do have to support the governor and the educational leadership and fall in line to a certain degree. So if that's going to be the case, We should support a marketing message at the very highest level about the importance of STEM within the state, and we should then push very, very hard in regards to supporting the different special interest groups that are going to come in and fight at STEM at different levels that we're supportive of. Let employers and let the ETIC group and let other people fight for this in regards to dollars. But that's not what we were asked to do. We were asked to make a recommended budget to the governor as well in regards to specific investments, and we did make specific investment recommendations to the governor. Very specific. STEM hubs are a very specific investment, right? STEM grants was a little ambiguous, but still, I think we all had clear in our mind how that would probably go, and I think the OTC concept was relatively clear on how that would work. This is the confliction I talked to you about yesterday. So do we just stay at the 100,000 foot level, or do we go down and we fight for those individual investments? And trust me, these guys over there are going to fight for individual things. Down in, there's money to be fought for. ETIC is going to go, employers group is going to go crazy about supporting for the OTC piece. Do we need to involve ourselves down in the agenda fight, or do we just stay above the fray and just keep pushing and lobbying and pushing the system to make more and more STEM investments?
It seems to me at this point what we can be, I think, reinforcing the messages that help people understand the connectivity between STEM and CTE in terms of connecting to the worlds of work, about creating a skilled workforce that's adaptable, about student engagement and graduation rates, because it's going to keep kids on the pathway, it's going to interest them, about breaking down the silos between classroom and community, about investing in statewide communications infrastructure to deprivatize practice, to move from program rich and systems poor to some place where we're actually spreading best practices. I mean, these are the things that we have advocated for in terms of our STEM hubs, where we're looking at these various notions that are worthy of investments there. And I think that if we run some risk of going off that message too far, the fact that we can, not co-brand necessarily, but reinforce the messages that we've already exchanged. I feel like we own those messages as well. And so it's.
Plus, I think there's really a unique opportunity to tie into the 3 education priorities of the state. We're trying to get. The governor certainly has declared them. The media is starting to pick up on them.
Yeah.
Legislators are starting to hear them, not that they necessarily all agree with them. They're not the only things we're doing in education.
Yeah.
We've picked out 3 that we're going to try to collectively work on. And one of those is connecting education to careers. So part of it, there's an opportunity for us to help people understand how our work really fits into that.
Yeah. And
it's not just the CTE. It's not just those middle 40. We're talking about a career.
Yeah.
And helping understand and position our work under that umbrella, I think, is a great opportunity.
And the 4 sort of things that I've heard Danny speak about after the last meeting was capturing this around economic vitality and prosperity. That's a huge piece, right? Oregon students, Oregon jobs. Student success, so that's actually not just in the connecting to the careers, but also in terms of furthering graduation rates and both at the K-12 and the post-secondary. Access and opportunity and equity. It's about that individual prosperity. It's breaking down. It's STEM is a social justice issue right now. It's about opportunity, and many of our students of color and our students in poverty don't have access to that opportunity. That's a huge message for us in STEM. Sustainability. It has to be about the systems. That's where the hubs fit in. It's about long-term change. How are we investing in this? How are we thinking differently about education? How are we bringing, education and industry together in a way that's never been done before? This is exciting stuff. We've got some real significant things underway here, and I think celebrating those successes and acknowledging that it's a really tough. It's really tough to change these cultures because they don't speak the same languages. And people are really frustrated with our education system. STEM and CTE are an answer, a piece of it. It's at the thin edge of the wedge to transform how we teach people overall, how we think about this. And reinforcing those messages from a STEM Investment Council, I think, is a really positive way to move into this legislative session with some really hard data, which are these things that I've conveyed in terms of like a fact sheet from Washington STEM. I would love to see this for Oregon, because it doesn't just talk to hearts, but what this is about, it's about winning hearts. It's not about winning heads right now.
I like the one with the numbers.
You know, this is also about winning hearts. Okay, all of this stuff just does is pull that string. And so putting those things together would be fantastic. These kinds of messages are the same in Oregon as they are in Washington.
So on the
They are saying
everywhere, yeah, exactly.
Almost, except to say, you know, we're
51st.
Washington we're 51st instead of 49th, you know?
We're behind Guam, yes.
Okay, so
Go Oregon.
here's where I end up with
Yeah.
what you just said. 'Cause a lot of what you just said is true. And then I started thinking about this very personally.
Yeah.
Okay, I signed up for this committee, what, a year and a half ago? Okay, to spend like, you know, what, a couple hours a quarter maybe? Was that the original? And now it's like, you want 2 of my days a month for 3 hours plus I'm on that STEM CTE thing, okay, which,
And the task.
Sure.
And the
task
test,
force.
and to that.
and
yeah.
then there's the reading that goes along with this, trying to understand and keep this stuff up to speed on what's going on. So I can actually articulate this to other people, you know, that's 2 more jobs. Okay,
So-
just let me finish this, okay, so. And I get this stuff, that's the scary part, I get this. And now I'm gonna have to go and try to articulate this to people who not only don't, but don't have the time, in some cases the interest, yet actually have to be moved in some way, shape, or form to take action around these issues. What would help me and how I would manage this is really being able to say, you know what, here's my area of interest and my area of concern. I go get money from the legislature. I figure out where to spend it. I bring people in front of me that actually understand this a lot better than I do, and I ask them really hard questions. But I ask those questions from a point of understanding what this is better than a lot of other people do. Why? Because I actually have a cross-section of information coming in that they don't have. Okay? We can see this in the industry perspective. And you know what? We're going to actually help the legislature. We're going to help the education folks do the work that needs to be done. Help them with the messaging. We'll do some of the advocacy because we can do that better than they can. We'll actually meet credible people in community with some of these messages. We're not going to actually come up with them because we can't. Okay? And then we're going to have some measures that actually show that we're moving a yardstick forward. Have to have that. And oh, by the way, we're going to make sure that we're actually pointing things out in community that are successes. Because I think that's the piece that's going to be the most impactful, because people backslide off of this really, really fast if they can't see some value that's being created. And you know what? The legislature may throw spitballs at us, okay, but we are their creature, really, okay? And we're actually a crap shield for them, between them and their constituents, when they say, well, why the hell did you guys go and get that money for X? Well, those guys said that this is the thing that we should have put it into. And it seemed to make sense at the time. Go beat those guys up, they'll throw a brick at us and we'll kind of duck and say, well, life's
My
rough.
bad.
Exactly.
Except we won't, because this works, yes.
Right? And then we'll move on. But we can make relationships and have conversations with a lot more people in community than they can, and really be able to focus those asks and those metrics in a way that can actually bring about the things that I think are possible for those kids. And let's be honest, it's not just kids. It's for all the people in our community that are going and trying to figure out how the hell to plug into this 21st century economy.
So, the most important things from my perspective to do to allow us to continue to have this conversation a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, is to go and make sure the legislators that created us understand what we're doing, what we've accomplished, and what we hope for, right? If they don't understand that, then this whole thing folds apart, right? So we have our opportunity to do that because there's a legislative session coming up. Consequently, there's also some advocacy to do on behalf of some things during that time. If this was a non-funding year, if this was an odd year on the legislature, we would still need to go and market to those legislators about where we are. In fact, there may even be language in the statute that says we have to go do this.
We do.
Yes.
Well, report to the OEIB, not to the legislature.
Yeah, tell the legislator that. So I would argue tactically, if we really want to get, what do we have to have here in the next 2 months to be able to do that? We have to have a PowerPoint deck that explains what we did, what we've done, and where we're going. We have to have.
Can it just be one page instead of a deck? I mean, this is pretty, can it just be like that?
Well, this is to support testimony that Jim ultimately is going to have to sit up in front of a couple committees and give. Jim has to testify.
It's like 10 slides on one page.
I know, it's good. Whatever, I don't care about a PowerPoint. Hey, we need to go do.
People are tired of my attitude, I'm just.
No, we need to go do a presentation to the proper subcommittees during session, right? Okay? To support the presentation, we need to have materials to hand to the legislators and to email to the legislators. And those materials are very similar to the materials that are already in existence and appear even right here. So we need to create a 1 or 2 pager that can be handed over. And we probably should hand over an FAQ because everybody doesn't like looking at the materials. They'd rather just ask their questions and see if they're answered in an FAQ, which I think you also have here, right? Fact sheet, right?
Well, that's a fact sheet, not a frequently asked question sheet.
Okay, well, similar, but yes. So an FAQ, something that, most important thing from an advocacy standpoint, we need to go find a student. We need to find a student K through 12 that it affects. We need to find a student in higher ed or at both levels probably that it affects, and we need to go find an employer. Fortunately, we need to find an employer who's also a parent that has the ultimate needs that are coming up through the system because they can dual testify. Oftentimes, my testimony starts off with saying I'm an employer, but I'm here today because I have 2 small children coming up through the system. That's why I'm really spending all this time and effort here. If we have that, I think we would be prepared for the next 6 months, buying us time to do some of the more strategic things that we need to be able to work through. But those are very urgent tactical things that we need to have done so that we can support the next 6 months. If you want to throw in and on top of that, do we have any sort of website? That's a lower priority.
Yeah.
But ultimately, a lot of people base what's the value, how serious are these people, it's a check mark on the legitimacy scale. And we have to have, that's all needs to coalesce as much as possible, point the same true compass heading as what our advocacy side is doing that are going to go and pound the pavement for dollars, right? I don't even think this needs to be as strong on dollars. I think Jim's testimony could be and the following investments have been recommended by the governor through a recommendation. We recommended to the OEIB through the governor's budgetary process have put this much money in. We thank the governor for.
Can we borrow the students that Kyle had on stage?
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. The one that Lita
Maybe. Students.
Yeah. No, we should. And we should find others because there is a bigger group.
Melissa had a fantastic one speaking at her meeting.
But there is no doubt that is the most powerful thing in the legislature. They're not going to want to hear from business associations. They're not going to want to hear from lobbyists. They're going to want to hear
So
from.
what are our next steps? We know that. We know that they want to.
So we have our next steps. We got to put all that together.
Okay.
Yeah, put all that together.
We just found the students. That's done. At level we should get done at the same time.
So.
Kyle and
And the
Melissa.
local impact, can we demonstrate local
Yes,
impact?
and that would be the question I was going to ask you. Where are we? Tepanya, has he refreshed numbers, or did we get that far with the STEM CT coalition? Or are we still working off the same data?
Well, what he's looking at is more a way to measure progress.
Yeah.
So by saying, looking at degree production, looking at credential production, those sorts of things. So he's trying to establish some benchmarks so that we can regularly report progress on those.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's the same thing as local impact. What I meant was in Pendleton, here's an example of a really awesome partnership, or here's a gorge, just so you can demonstrate the local impact to lawmakers.
So with the students, with that, some other very specific, and I think that's where we can talk about that. Obviously, Jim would need to say, we made investments. We have to report on those investments. What how many hubs were created, but not how many were created, what are they doing? What's the best, coolest thing the South Metro's done, right?
Right.
And maybe they have the student there that does it.
Oh, sure.
Whatever the case may be, or the teacher that talk passionately about suddenly having support for something that they haven't had support. So what I would argue, next steps, Aubrey Clark, Intel Corporation, who hates meetings, which is really a dichotomy that I
Action
don't
required.
understand.
Next step, let's go.
All right, next step is a meeting that discusses the tactical things that we have to get
A
done.
meeting to discuss the tactical.
Or-
Who's gonna draft all
We're
these?
getting ready
That-
to start.
Bingo. Who's gonna do all this stuff? Right? We have to sign all this stuff. Maybe we can assign this in emails and we can get this fired out, but ultimately, there's a lot of work to be done here. Traditionally, and this is stuff that I used to do myself, or Kyle would do, and for her group. And I mean, this is stuff that has always been just bootstrapped. This goes to, do we have budget? I mean, does the STEM Investment Council have the ability to just task you with creation of all this stuff in a professional manner? And we'd like to see it in 30 days, because the session starts in 21.
They should do that.
And do we have to then make this recommendation to the total council, and the total council then has to tell you, you got 30 days to create this stuff?
No, I don't think we need to get overly formal with some of that particular piece. We are creating Kristen Gimbel is creating a one-pager around STEM investments. We need to then coordinate with the governor's office, certainly in terms of whatever Danny is creating in terms of the
Do we
STEM and
really?
CT. Yeah, we absolutely do. That's my reality. So the fact, but I think what we can do is we can certainly set up the case making and all of that. Creating a deck isn't, let's put something around and see what people feel are the messages that resonate the most strongly. We've been doing that for a year.
Who's the deck putter together? Do you have an admin? Can Kathy do that? Or do you want us to go shop it at our places of work to see if people have time on that? I mean, it just needs to get done, and so that's.
Yeah, well, I'm
we're not, I'm not, I don't think we're all looking at you like this is just automatically your job to put all this together, or
Well,
maybe it is,
well,
I don't
aspects
know,
of
or
it, I
maybe
think
you
it
have
is.
support to do it.
Well, aspects of it are, whether or not there's the bandwidth to do
Resource,
that
you
is
know,
So-
don't know.
under question.
Jim, I wish Jim was here, because he obviously, and is it Kimberly?
Kim.
And Kim is awesome, right? She did a great job in the breakout session, and I don't know what her job responsibilities are within the organization, and how much bandwidth she has. But ultimately, Jim is the chair. Jim's the one that we're gonna say, Jim, guess what, buddy? You're center stage here. This is what we need to present. I would assume Jim's gonna have some very strong feelings about how he puts himself out there. And he
Yeah.
may take control of the situation because of it, or he may want to manage it or own it, or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
These are things that we need to do. We know we need to probably reach out, and it is probably you and I could probably reach out from this committee to legislators and chairs to find out what committees are interested in hearing. I know higher ed is going to want to hear this. Ed
Mhm.
is going to want to hear this. The question is
Yeah.
whether
If
Ways
you
and
could do
Means
that,
wants.
that would be helpful.
Okay.
On that.
I will take
I
that
will
action.
work with Jim and Kim to put together a deck. I'd like to work with the hubs, and Melissa, I'm looking at you, being one of the strongest hubs that we have with examples of success. I think all of the hubs have different levels of success and different natures of it. Your particular work in your hub resonates for a number of reasons, because of the 40-40-20, the work on early college credit work, the work that you have in terms of employers and classroom-based professional development, building-based professional development with employers and teachers. So having an employer and having a teacher being able to talk to about the impact that's had on them and on the students.
Also interns at Intel.
So
But then also, do you have numbers associated with, how many students are actually getting that, dual credit or early college credit? I don't know.
Dual credit stuff is easier, yeah.
Yeah.
It's in progress, of course.
Of course.
But, yeah, we can.
So let's put together just a very, one slide.
Kyle, are you
type
gonna be
of
there
thing.
this afternoon?
And then,
No.
and then Kyle, if,
Maybe by phone.
Okay.
So
I'd love
is
to
that-
work with you and John.
Joe, is that
Absolutely.
you
I
that
was
sends
gonna
out
say
the request to
Oregonians
the STEM
would be
hubs
a
for
place
that
to
information?
get some support.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks a
All
lot.
right.
We'll follow
Thank
up.
you.
Thank you, Kyle.
So
I already have
Noted.
some of those
Okay.
stories.
Jim's present.
I asked Jo if that was her responsibility to reach out to all the hubs to get their nuggets to.
Yeah, stories of success would be great if we've got some, but let's
Then we can get more.
look at how those stories are told, because
So Jim's report will be specific to the, not only to the investments that have been made, to report out on them, but he will also then talk about the strategic efforts around STEM at the highest level that we've been talking about earlier today. And the white paper and the FAQ would be only about STEM at the highest level. It would not dive down into the individual things like STEM hubs and things like that in regards to detail. You may say that these are the things that are important to implementing, but you don't want to get into trying to create an FAQ or a statement about the details of a STEM hub. Let the STEM hubs come and testify about what they do, right? And then,
well, we might want a one-pager around the STEM hub, since that's
It's part
one
of
of the
STEM
major,
investment councils that we
it's,
spend money on.
it's one of the major investment strategies.
Right,
you
it's
know,
a
one that we
strategy, and we should
that
talk
we
about
can
the
talk
strategy,
about.
but not the detail that's going on in each one of them.
exactly,
Right.
that would be.
You know, what do they tend to do? What is a STEM hub?
Why is this our investment strategy?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Where's my,
All right.
where's my hub?
So, to refresh, you're going to reach out to Jim and just let him know what's coming, that he's going to be, his duties as chair is to testify and spend some time in Salem in front of committees explaining what the STEM Investment Council has accomplished and what we're planning on
I'll
doing.
be happy to do one-on-ones with as many legislators
Yeah.
as need. I'll talk to all of them.
Exactly, so will I.
All of
I
them.
already
Yeah.
plan on to.
I'm ready anyway.
We'll put together a team there, yeah. And then the materials. And I assume, again, we can pull materials from other sources for the language. We don't have to continue to I mean,
Do we have a brand?
you know,
We don't.
We don't. I think the state seal,
Do you need more of a brand than this?
this is very official and holds weight in my
Yes.
mind. If we brand it with a nice tree and some leaves and stuff, that's just taking you down into
No,
the.
that's a
the
fine.
coalition.
That's the coalition, it's the state seal. Boom.
You could put under it, powered by the tree.
Powered by, there you go.
Sorry.
Do you have a little logo that rings every time we say it? That's your job.
Yeah, it's called a bomb.
A bomb. Whoa.
It's called the Until Bog, Eric.
Oh, is it really?
It gets me every time.
Ding,
If,
ding.
if there are communications directors or an interest, either at Intel or at PGE
To
or
help.
to help this, I think Di Saunders
At OIT.
at OIT would be very
She's
helpful if
swamped right
she's,
now, though.
you know, if she has bandwidth for this,
Yeah.
that would be important.
What about the communications person at OEIB, what about Indi? Oh, she's at the
When you say
head.
comms, you're talking about how to write all this stuff up. When you say marketing, that's
Well,
different. It's
How do
to
we
make
present
pretty.
it, yeah. Yeah. well,
Again,
both. Yeah.
steal everything you possibly can. I don't think we need to recreate the wheel here at all.
No, I think you can.
Yeah.
But how to tighten it up and make
Tighten it up.
presentable is.
And again, I think
Not
unfortunately,
easy.
to a
It's not
great
easy.
degree, most of it just goes to an envelope that then goes someday to a circular file without barely being seen. But it's marketing pieces, it's points of impression. You have to hand the stuff over. It's a
Because this
ceremony.
way, someone taught me years ago how to
Well-
deal with politicians and legislators and really powerful people. You boil it down to three.
Yeah.
Okay, and you give them real easy talking points to remember about it, that they can see.
You cannot underestimate that
Well,
advice.
Yeah. I do think that we need to agree as a subcommittee on what those key messages are. You know, I really think,
I do. We're gonna
you know,
have
the
to
things
agree.
around, you know, prosperity, about student engagement and success. You know, I think these are the things that we just need to say, here's,
Yeah.
all of this stems about prosperity.
Yeah, no, that's-
Prosperity for our students of color, prosperity for our communities, prosperity for, you know, and we nail it.
To the six, honestly, it's been conversations around tax income for the state of Oregon,
Sure.
just so you know.
You can make that.
Well, no,
So
nobody
Mark,
wants that
Mark,
conversation
Are you
publicly.
gonna turn this out to
That's a
us
private
within
conversation.
Which?
The next week?
No, there's no way. I can
I
do
mean,
that.
your notes.
I can send you the notes
Yeah.
such as they are.
The note, that's what I'm talking about.
But yeah,
This
you
is,
can do that.
this is the
All
right,
problem,
yeah, yeah.
this is the problem that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So can we, any public comment to just to round off the itinerary here?
That's why I
If you
don't
have
want, I
anyone
don't want
that
us
wants
continue
to
to
see
look at
this
you
in
like
action,
take
Yep.
all this
have them
on.
come
That's
between
fine.
10 o'clock and 2 o'clock next Saturday or next Sunday. Janet Rash, myself, some others will be there to give
Yep.
tours during the state FLL
Just-
Lego
just
Robotics
so we
tournament.
can-
Absolutely.
If you know of anybody that you want to experience it, have them come, we'll walk them around. and talk
I
about
thought you were
what's
talking about
Don't-
doing
don't-
No.
these
let's
other
not let
No,
this
God,
get
no.
lost.
pieces now.
God, no.
Hey, Mark.
But, I gotta go.
Okay.
Meeting, 12:15.
Okay.
Go. Go.
All right. Thanks, Albert.
Thank you.
Get that bell. Later.
A recommendation was just brought up about the fact that there is an opportunity that doesn't come but once a year to really see STEM in action.
Uh-huh.
And that is the large robotics competition is occurring next weekend, not this coming, but the next weekend at, what is it, Westview?
It's at Liberty High School.
Liberty High School. It almost should be mandatory participation by the STEM Investment Council
Can you
members.
send me the details and I'll send it around?
Please
to
do, and
them?
not only just send it around, but really
Strongly encourage people to.
strongly encourage people to
Can we
come for
get,
just an hour or two.
Are you having media coverage there?
There's some media.
They're
coverage.
invited every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're invited
They
every
show
year.
up sometimes. and
It
We have a
would-
sometimes they don't.
VIP desk, and you come in, just come to the VIP desk.
Yeah.
and we'll-
Well, here's what I'm thinking is I want to leverage these events, you
Yes.
know, so if we can get Kim,
Mhm.
if we can get Jim there and have, you know,
Yep.
whatever, you know, station interview him while at the robotics competition, that's great, you know, so how do we reinforce and get FaceTime?
Exactly. So Jill Island is always there. She's a big sponsor. She'll be there, especially and probably only on Sunday on Trophy Day. But
Hillsborough School
They're
District
both,
is a-
No, who
trophies are
does
passed out both days.
both days, Saturday.
Two separate tournaments.
Okay. Saturday's the day though, if we can. do it.
Saturday and Sunday, but Saturday's a better day.
Yeah.
For most people.
So
We
when
can-
is Jill coming?
We
So
can
let's
find
coordinate
out.
that.
I'll ask her this afternoon.
She
and
usually
find out.
comes at the end of the day for the awards ceremony.
So let's try to make sure that both Jim and Jill get interviewed.
See,
The
to me, it's more
action,
important to get
you
a
need to be
legislator
there
there
between
who's
10 and
different than
2.
Right.
just stand
Awards
there.
ceremonies at the end of
You
the
get a
day.
picture.
Right, like 4, right?
That
Yeah,
speaks
but
to
you
the-
really want to go around and
Five.
see kids and meet kids.
Yeah.
Who are the legislators? Is Tobias going out there?
We can, Tobias usually attends, you usually get most of the West Washington County folks usually make it there.
So do you know who all those are?
Let me, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this up today at the
Okay.
CTE STEM meeting with the
And let's
task
try to
force.
get, yeah.
And try,
That's a good
you know
idea.
who really needs to be there? It's Danny. Because it will, Danny, the governor's advisor, needs to be there because,
That's him, that's his portfolio in action.
yeah. And Danny needs
That'd be
to
great.
see the fact that it is a rainbow of colors and it is a multi-sexed group and it is exactly what you need to see. It is, yeah, I won't say I won't go too
I think
far, but
that's great.
that competition is life-changing for anybody that walks in and sees it.
Who's changed my kid's life?
Yep.
Who's the governor's communications person now? It's not Tim anymore.
I don't know.
Because I mean, this, to me, that's the person to call and say, you need to get somebody here for this. And
Nancy would be another person, if she can walk through that door, would be, it'd be an amazing statement for the support of both CT and
Can
STEM.
you get that to me this afternoon, Don, so that I can get that information out?
Joe, who's technically in charge? Is Bruce the center point?
I just
on-
need it here so that it's forwarded. I don't need it here.
Okay.
I need it in an email so that I don't have to recreate it.
Marty Wetzel is
That's all.
running
Yeah,
FLL.
So just send
Is
it.
Bruce still in the building here?
that's what I'm wondering.
He has an office.
He's
I don't know whether
showing
he's
up there.
there.
Today.
Wonderful.
I don't know whether he's here right now. We can go ring the doorbell.
Let's go ring the doorbell, because that would be the person to understand, so you have a full understanding of what the opportunities are, and then we can push
Yeah.
on the other ones.
And if you guys want to set up appointments, I'm an ideal person to do those tours because I've done them for years and I've been a coach for years. and
Yeah.
I know the
So,
whole program.
Savannah-
So I need the information to try to get this on Nancy's agenda
Yeah.
and other people's.
I-
But this is the kind of thinking that I want
I know.
happening, and with all the hubs too, is just like, where are the opportunities for that media exposure, and who do we need to
All
have there?
right, meeting adjourned.